to your latest episode of the Bears Huddle podcast, your UK take on our Chicago Bears as we look ahead to the new season. Yes, it's still a way to go, September, even today in the 1st of May. It's been 4 months, still 4 months. That's a long time, isn't it? It's a long time, 4 months. We're still got a bit of a way to go to get to the season. We've got OTAs to get through, obviously, training camp, pre-season. Obviously, before that, you've got the dead time of the summer. You've got a lot to get through, obviously, before we get to the season beginning. But we're going to look at a bit of an issue. We looked yesterday at the running back issue. Did we have enough? Look, I think before I'm not sitting here and I make one thing well. Let me make one thing clear. I am not sitting here and I am not criticising Ryan Poles or Ben Johnson. I am not criticising them at all. They know how to do their job far better than I could ever do their job. They're far better than me. All I'm doing is kind of raising a couple of questions. Do we have enough at certain positions going into this new season? And I think, as well as they've done through the off-season in terms of recruiting free agents, the offensive line is certainly looking a hell of a lot better than last season. Obviously, the draft has added some quality pieces, particularly weapons for Caleb Williams, the acquisitions of Colston Loveland and Luther Burden, for example. The offensive line will be a debate, and we'll certainly talk offensive line at some point on the pod. But we're talking today about the defense, and as we all know, let's face it, as Philadelphia showed in the most recent Super Bowl, defense wins championships. And that's what you need. You need an awesome defense, and we've got a fantastic defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen. The issue now, obviously, is addressing that edge rusher. I think a lot of people kind of were hoping that given the fact the edge rusher class was so deep in that recent draft, that we would have gone and selected an edge rusher. Someone would have come in, particularly around the pick 41, rather than trading back, that we would have perhaps gone for someone at that point, or even, with the pick that we took Ozzie Trapilo with. I mean, I'm not a big Trapilo fan, but that we would have gone for an edge rusher at that position. Who knows? But look, it's still seen as being a bit of an issue, or maybe the Bears don't see it as an issue. Maybe there is a plan for that position that we as fans are just not aware of. Now, looking at the present, and I know Ben Johnson, if anyone says, Ben Johnson said there is no depth chart. Well, this is the kind of depth chart that's on ESPN, and it's kind of featuring the players that have been drafted. And if the season began today, this is possibly what it may look like. So in terms of that 4-3 base defense, Montez Sweat, defensive end, Grady Jarrett, Gervon Dexter, Dio Odeyingbo. God, that's so hard to say, isn't it? Backed up by Daniel Hardy, Andrew Billings, Chris Williams, and they've got Shemar Turner listed as an edge rusher. So look, I mean, I don't know to what degree that is true, and that's certainly something we'll discuss. But, looking at that edge, and then there is players obviously further back than that, but I've just gone for the kind of starter and backup. Do we have enough? That's the question. Is there enough there in that defensive line position? Is there enough players to kind of come in and cover for Montez Sweat, obviously, and Dio Odeyingbo? Now, obviously, with Dio, there's a bit of a gamble. Dio, obviously, is the guy that... Before anyone says, yes, I know that Grady Jarrett is not a edge rusher, and I will get to why Grady Jarrett is there in a minute. But, look, obviously we've got Montez Sweat, who is, the main man. And I think it was always seen as us needing someone to come in and, back him up, wasn't it? It really was, needed. Now, Dio Odeyingbo is coming off not the best of seasons with Indianapolis. He had 31 combined tackles, 18 assisted tackles, and 3 sacks, which was a low after his 8 sacks in 2023 and his 5 sacks in 2022. He seemed to be having that progression, didn't he? Obviously 2021, he comes into the NFL, has 0.5 sacks, then the next year goes up to 5, then to 8, but then falls off in 2024. So obviously, there's a bit of a gamble there that he will come in, that he'll be able to get back to the form that he showed in 2023, and really bring that pressure from the edge, to really add to Montez Sweat. Now, obviously, looking at how it is, I think there's obviously, I think that maybe Dennis Allen has spoken very much about the pass rush from the inside. He's talked about interior pass rush quite a lot, hasn't he? And obviously that's why Grady Jarrett is coming in. Obviously Grady Jarrett, I think, is a quality piece to add into that interior pass rush, and he'll certainly bring something to that interior pass rush and bring the pressure. But you look beyond Montez Sweat, who another one who had a 5.5 sack season last year. He's consistently around 5.5, 6 sacks every single season. Had the one standout year when he was with Washington, when he had 8 in 2022. But you've got, I think, a situation where you look at that depth and you kind of worry a little bit, is there enough cover for those two? If, let's face it, if worse came to worse and one of them was injured, or there's always the need to kind of spell them, is there enough there to kind of cover for them? Now, Shemar Turner has been listed as a defensive end, and he has played as a defensive end. Now, his first 2 seasons at Texas A&M, he actually played as an edge rusher. It was only in his senior year that he was moved inside. So, it could be that Shemar Turner is someone that, is being thought of as being a player who can play as an edge, that he can be that edge rusher. It's a possibility. It's a definite possibility there, and it could be that's why they've drafted him. That's why they've brought him in to play as an edge. Going back to his college career, he hasn't got great sack number. He hasn't got. He didn't have great sack numbers in 21-22. When he was sort of moved to that interior position, he then went to 6 sacks in 2023 and then 2 sacks in 2024. Turner is kind of he looks more slimmed down. He looks more edge rusher-esque, doesn't he, in the way he kind of shapes up. Now, there's also been talk possibly of maybe Gervon Dexter is being looked at as being a possibility to move to the edge. There was talk around, when he came into those mini camps before the draft, and he looked very much slimmed down, didn't he? People automatically started to talk and automatically started to put 2 and 2 together and maybe come up with 12. I don't know, and kind of say, well, maybe they're seeing Gervon Dexter as someone who can move to the edge. Be put out there. That's another one. Austin Booker, another one who could be, used as an edge rusher. Maybe the Bears are looking to kind of fulfill that extra edge position by moving Gervon Dexter out, by perhaps playing, Shemar Turner there, maybe even using Austin Booker there. That is sort of the talk, isn't it? On the interior defensive line, you then obviously state, well, if Gervon Dexter's going to move to the edge, who comes into play alongside Grady Jarrett? Well, probably Andrew Billings, maybe Chris Williams, who, or even... Is Zach Pickens finally going to sort of show what we hoped he would be? That's got to be the question, hasn't it? So, look, I still think it's a position they do need to address. Which you look at it and you kind of say, well, what's out there? That's the key question. What's out there? Obviously, the draft is gone now. There is a hope, obviously, that maybe one of these 2 undrafted free agents can come in and become depth pieces. Xavier Carlton and Jeremy, I think it's Robinson, is it the guy's name? Maybe those guys can come in and be that extra edge rusher. That's obviously got to be a hope. Now, you look at the current free agent situation. The free agent situation is this. This is what is left. This is kind of your, end of the night. Kind of you sitting there at the bar. You look down the bar. This is what is left at the end of the night. So you've obviously you've got Von Miller, you've got Matt Judon, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith, DeMarcus Walker, Farley Futkowski, Kazir White, John Kaminsky, Brandon Graham. I think he's retired. Jalen Reeves, Mabin, Dennis Gardeck, Shaq Thompson, Montravius Adams, Jerry Hughes, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce that guy's name, Tanoa, whatever he's called. Look, Von Miller's a class act. We know that Von Miller is a good player, but he is not getting any younger, is he? He's 36 years old. So I very much think that he will not be the man that comes in. He will not be the player that you would look at. Certainly not. Matt Judon, I suppose, is a possibility. He was someone that the Bears did look at last year in the offseason to bring in to kind of see as been a possible. So, does Ryan Poles revisit the Matt Judon situation? Preston Smith, again, don't really rate the guy. Zadarius Smith, is he looking to tick off every single NFC North team? He's played for the Lions, he's played for the Packers, he's played for the Vikings. Is he going to come and play for the Bears and tick off his list and say he's done the full set? He's a fairly decent player there. DeMarcus Walker's obviously ours. I mean, he's likely to go. Kazir White, that's another one, another possibility. 29, slightly younger. Is he someone that the Bears may look at? Is he a possible there to come in and do a job for the Bears? There's obviously people out there, but it's, I think, a situation where you look at it and you kind of think, well, whoever you bring in, I think, looking at their age, looking at who they are, is going to be a 1-year rental. I mean, Kazir White, for example, his form is not great. 2.5 sacks in 24, 2 sacks in 23, 1.5 in 22, 1 in 21. He's not a prolific guy, is he? He's not someone who comes in and produces great numbers. So, he's perhaps another one off the list. So, you're looking perhaps at the top of that list more so than as you move down it. That's where you're looking. I mean, people talk about Shaq Thompson. I think he's even worse. I mean, he's had no sacks last year, no sacks the year before, and last time he had a sack was a half a sack in 22. So I think he's off the list. Von Miller, I think, is too old. So you're looking at, the likes of perhaps Matt Judon, Zadarius Smith has been possible options, but do they want to come in and be bit part players? Do they want to come in and just be backups, which I think is what you're looking at? I mean, Matt Judon still had some pretty good numbers coming out of Atlanta last year. 5.5 sacks, 1 interception. He was 4 sacks with New England in 2023, 15, and he had his big seasons 21-22, 21, 12.5 sacks, 22, 15.5 sacks. So maybe Matt Judon is the obvious one. I mean, his previous salary was 13.6, and I think, as we know, the longer this goes on, the longer you kind of have that situation where you're not being picked up, your value decreases, doesn't it? Your ability to get a high price, for your salary does decrease. So it may be that, with the cap situation the way it is, with the fact that, as I said on the video the other day, if we signed all our rookies today, we'd be $3 million over the cap. There is no cap space at this moment in time to acquire anyone, and it's going to take time. And I think, if we do go for an edge rusher, it's going to be further down the line, closer to training camp or through training camp. Once we've perhaps even cut some players post June 1st, you've got to look at that situation. Judon, looks a good player, looks a possible. I think someone who I think would come in and perhaps add to that rotation. But like I said, it may be that they're genuinely not looking there. They genuinely feel that in Sweat, Odeyingbo, Shemar Turner, Austin Booker, maybe even playing Dexter out there at some point, you've got enough. There's enough there. Or it's that Dennis Allen very much sees that the interior pass rush, bringing the likes of Billings, Jarrett, Dexter, Williams, etc., will be enough in that defensive line. So, look, I think there is a lot of discussion to go on this one, and a lot of it. And personally, my personal opinion is I think we do need to add there. I think someone like Matt Judon would be a very good add, but it's what he wants. It's what terms he wants. How much money does the guy want to play next year in the NFL? Like I said, I think the good thing is that, the longer it goes on, the more depressed these guys' values get. So I don't know. There's the options, guys. There's the options. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments. Who would you go for from that list of UFAs that are still available at this moment in time? And even like I said, Zadarius Smith coming off the back of a 4-sack season in Detroit. I mean, his last big season was 10 sacks with Minnesota in 22. And then he's obviously 2 previous big sack seasons. That was 20 and 19 when he had 12.5 and 13.5 respectively. So who are you looking at? Who is your guy? And do you think we need to add, or are you happy going in with Odeyingbo, Sweat, Hardy, Turner, Booker, and possibly Dexter shipping out there? Guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching the Bears Huddle podcast. As on the way, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And guys, let's bear down. See you later, Chicago.